Hey guys, what's happening? Welcome back to Your Forest. I'm Matthew Christoph, and today I've got a podcast regarding urban forestry. And for those of you who don't know what urban forestry is, basically, Crispin Wood, he is the parks manager for urban forestry in the city of Edmonton. And so he's responsible for the care of the trees within the city limits, whether that's the trees in the river valley, so the natural trees, all the way to the boardwalk trees and the trees on the streets. So anything planted or natural. And he's responsible for the health of those, trimming those, not personally trimming them, but the crews that do so, worrying about pests that might come in or creating new green spaces, all that kind of stuff. It's really interesting. We were talking a lot about the value of trees and what kind of values they provide society. So a lot of people look around and they look at the trees and they say, oh, that's a nice tree. And they kind of don't think twice about it, right? About what it's providing them. But it's doing all kinds of things for not only aesthetically, but also for your health, environmentally, economically, all kinds of different stuff. I mean, the trees are cleaning a crazy amount of air. They're removing pollution from the air. They're reducing the amount of stress on the stormwater system, which is tax dollars at work. They decrease, or they're really good insulators, right? So they provide insulation in the summer and the winter, so decreasing cooling and heating costs. And they just feel and look awesome, right? Like we want trees in and around our homes. I know I said at the very beginning of this episode, we're talking about residential areas and the new developments. And there's something about those new developments that just don't seem as comfortable and relaxing as something old where you've got old boardwalk trees everywhere, right? So there's something to be said about trees in our landscape. And Crispin has been managing those urban forests for a few years now. And he's responsible for some of the policies that he's trying to create to help protect these and help make sure that our forests are healthy for generations to come. And it was a really interesting conversation. I think you guys will like it. As for sponsors today, same three: Greenlink Forestry, thanks a lot. And also the Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta. Couldn't do this without them. And Damaged Timber. Damaged Timber is an apparel company out of Edmonton. And they're trying to promote environmental sciences, basically, through the sale of their clothing. So they're giving 10% of all their sales towards a scholarship for environmental science students. And they're giving the first one away in the fall here. And they got really cool stuff. They've got really cool hats, t-shirts, hoodies, stuff like that. It's really cool. I think you guys will like it. If you want something like that, if you want to support environmental sciences through the buying of clothes, go to damagedtimber.com and put in Your Forest 10 at checkout for 10% off on top of all of that. So I hope you guys like this one. It was really cool. I really like talking to Crispin. He talked about 1 million miles a minute. He knows that. So I think we set a record for a number of words per minute in this episode. It was good, but he talks clearly and he got the point across. It was awesome. So without any further ado, here we go. Crispin Wood and myself on urban forestry. So I just wanted to start off with, I like to start off with getting the background of people and kind of where they started and what got you into like urban forestry and dealing with vegetation in like an urban environment.
All right. Well, yeah. I mean, so how I got into urban forestry is actually, I guess it's kind of a cute story. When I was in high school, it was grade 11. Yeah. I mean, you're a young kid. Your head is in the clouds. You're much more interested in girls than anything else. I was looking for something to do. Yep. The
Where
school
was this?
had
Where'd you grow up?
This was in Ottawa.
Oh, okay.
The Colonel By Cougars is what we were, our high school. And in grade 11, we had a co-op program. Yep. So I went to see the co-op teacher, and I was interested in this co-op program because the idea of actually, getting out and getting some work experience excited me. Yeah. And of course, sitting down with the co-op coordinator, she asked me, well, what are you interested in? What do you like? And I just kind of looked at her blankly. And the first thing that came to mind was, I like trees. And honestly, that was the beginning.
Not outside, trees.
That was it. Trees specifically. I think that was awesome. The beginning of the end. So she looked at me and said, have you ever considered, working at the Arboretum? And of course, my immediate reaction was the Arbo what? Like, what's an Arboretum? So she said, oh, well, the Arboretum, it's the collection of trees. We have one in Ottawa.
Right.
And I can maybe get you in contact with the curator down there, and maybe we can get you a job as a high school co-op placement.
Nice.
So of course I thought, okay, this is great. And young kid, head in the clouds, doesn't know what he's doing. Ends up getting accepted for that's it. I got accepted for a little bit of an interview to go down there, and of course I put my suit and tie on, which never and I'll explain a little bit later why that was so funny. But of course I show up there, and it's just this rough, grizzly old guy, and he says, okay, well, here, I'll show you around. And he gives me a little bit of tour. And he's like, you want to do co-op? You're hired, but you have to be willing to work, right? Yeah. It's like, none of this suit and tie business. I want to see you here in, work boots.
Yeah.
So of course I, put on my work boots, went out and bought a pair of work boots, put on my work boots, and showed up. And that really was the beginning of the end. I mean, I ended up working there as a co-op student in high school, got hired on as a summer student shortly after that. Then when I went to university and did my degree in biology, I ended up working there all through the summers.
Nice.
And of course, graduated from biology, was looking for a job, and they said, how about you work here? And of course, loving the place. And by this point, learning quite a bit about, botanical nomenclature, learning how to identify my tree species, and essentially nerding out for the past roughly 6 years at the Arboretum. I thought, great, why not?
Yeah.
And within about a year or 2 years, I got a little bit bored. So I decided to leave and go do a diploma in forestry up in Pembroke, Ontario, so north of Ottawa. Did a diploma in forestry engineering technology, graduated from that program, and that's the program where I was sort of introduced to the International Society of Arboriculture, arborist certification, and more the practical side of both industrial forestry and urban forestry.
Yeah.
So I was able to really sort of narrow down my focus a little bit. My general biology degree was, again, quite general. When I graduated, I didn't know exactly what I was supposed to be or what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
The diploma, definitely, while I was quite interested in working in the bush, I didn't love the idea of getting eaten by black flies every single day, which was certainly something that anyone from Northern Ontario is well aware of.
Yeah,
that's part of the job. So when I graduated, there was an opportunity to go back and work at the Arboretum again. They had a job opening, so needing the money, I jumped on it.
Surprised you're still not there.
Well, that's just it. So I guess I worked there very quickly. Ended up in the position where I was the lead arborist, managing the Arboretum, the woody plant collections, some of the horticulturalists, the rare plant propagation program, ensuring the collection, the sustainability collection, all the collections management.
Yep.
Learned a lot about horticulture while I was there, greenhouse management, it was a really, it was a fantastic job, actually, working for the federal government, nice pension, nice benefits, but an absolutely amazing place to work. Great team, extremely welcoming. And we got a lot of really good work done.
Yeah. You probably know your species like nobody else, too.
Well, I honestly, I seem to have, I don't want to say I've lost it, but it's almost like the old adage where, you start to learn things, and at one point you cram so much in your head, stuff's got to leak out one ear. So I find people sometimes come to me with tree ID, and I look at, the product the branch sample they put in front of me, and I know what it is. It's just not coming to me. And I'm thinking to myself, 5-6 years ago, I would have been able to tell you exactly what this was right down to the cultivar. But
man, I'm surprised I still remember your name. Don't worry about it. It's like, honestly, it's that bad.
But anyway, I mean, I worked there, and don't get me wrong, it was a fantastic job. But at one point, I think I outgrew it. I realized that there wasn't really an opportunity for me to progress.
Yeah.
I had done the job for a number of years, and it was, I don't think it was giving back to the organization as much as I could, simply based on the limitations of my role, and the fact that, once you become really comfortable in a position, it becomes actually very easy. You know who to go to, who to talk to, how to get the job done. You find your efficiencies, and I don't want to say it became boring, but possibly outgrew it. Yeah. So at that point, I made the decision to, it was either, now or never. I jumped and did my master's.
Nice.
So I went across the country to UBC, did a master's in sustainable forest management, was able to, again, guide that program because it was a master's program towards urban forestry.
Yep.
Did some of my sort of project work and thesis work with the city of Vancouver. I already had a pretty good formation in certainly arboriculture. So working at the Arboretum, I learned, climbing arboriculture, working from bucket trucks, equipment operation, everything you need to do, structural pruning, soil planting, what have you. I understood the operations side of things. It was that sort of urban forestry side, the policy planning side, the forest management side that I was definitely not as strong in, the contract management, contractor supervision. So after doing my master's, I took a leave of absence when I actually left the federal government in Ottawa. I went back, but I lasted about 6 months. I was quickly looking for other positions, looking for a way to spread my wings. Went to the York region, so the regional municipality of York, which is north of Toronto. It's a municipality roughly like a conglomerate municipality, higher tier municipality that includes Vaughan, Markham, some of the larger municipalities, those sub-municipalities north of the GTA. It's a population of about 1.3 million. It's a sizable municipality, and I was there as an area forester. So that was just managing the contract work, and that's where I got my sort of real first urban forestry experience as an urban forester. That's where I learned contract management, project management, was able to hone those skills, and really understand that municipal context, because federal government's quite a bit different than municipal government. You are in federal government surprisingly very buffered from the public and from sort of any changes or demands of the public. Recognizing that anything that's going to be influencing you from the public has to come through federal parliament. It's going to take a while to get down to your level. Municipal government, people will phone you up directly. You've got a direct line to the councillor's offices. So you're definitely much more impacted day to day by the needs of the residents. So you find you're much more a public servant, or you feel much more as a public servant in municipal government than you would say in federal government, just from my experience. So that was kind of that first introduction, that recognition that you really are being scrutinized and watched, and you definitely have to raise yourself to a higher level, because there's expectations that you're going to be behaving at that level, and that you're going to be providing services that the residents demand. So that was definitely a learning experience. But of course, my partner, being in industrial forestry, met her in when I was doing my master's at UBC. Was working in High Prairie here in Alberta. As a planning forester for West Fraser. And of course, I was looking for an opportunity to come out here. My background being in urban forestry, I was definitely struggling trying to break into the industrial forestry sector. While there were a lot of jobs, it seems like nobody was willing to recognize some of my past experiences coming in as somebody with at least 15 years under my belt, none of the transferable skills. It seems like, as you were referring to earlier, some of the old dogs of urban forestry, I think they were looking at me and saying, city boy, no, I don't think so. You need to cut your teeth. So I wasn't willing to come in at an entry level, working for a forestry firm with 15 years experience behind my belt, working at a fairly senior level in both municipal and federal government. But an opportunity came up to work for the city of Edmonton as operations supervisor. So
That's 3 years now you've been there?
So I guess operations supervisor, and now it was about a year as an operations supervisor, and I've now been about another 3 years as the manager of urban forestry for the city. So fairly quickly, the opportunity arose to take on that management role. And I remember I was a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but within the first year, as the operations supervisor, the manager, whose office was right next to mine, who ironically I didn't report into, but we got a good working relationship. And I told her that, I'm a forestry nerd. I love trees. That's what I'm here to do. That's definitely my vocation. That's why I'm here on this planet. I'm not interested in really moving into any senior roles that don't have any influence on the urban forest. So the only job I'd be really interested in, other than the one I'm currently in, would be hers. And of course, I did it a little bit tongue in cheek. It's not like I was gunning for her job, but it was sort of just in casual conversation. And of course, she laughed, and within a month, she retired. So, she didn't retire. She actually took a job. She's now working as the manager of urban forestry for the city of Calgary. And I had the opportunity. So it was either now or never, and I jumped into it.
Nice.
She had family down in Calgary. She had been with the city of Edmonton for about 7 years. And I think there was that opportunity. The position became available. It was closer to her family. I think she was originally from Medicine Hat, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that made sense for her to make that move, and it provided an opportunity for me. And yes, I've been there ever since. 3 years.
That's awesome. So I wonder, I guess we should talk a bit about urban forestry. And I think because a lot of people, they think of a forester out, out in the wild, out in industrial forestry, right? So What exactly, in like brief terms, what is the like urban forester's role? What do you guys do? Your job right now, you're parks manager of
Briefly,
yeah.
Briefly that elevator talk,
not an hour long, right?
Well, I could go for a lot longer than that. I guess that's it. It's always very difficult to summarize your position when you know it so well. What I guess was it Albert Einstein once said, a person doesn't know their subject well enough if they can't explain it concisely. Maybe I don't know my subject well enough, but it's going to take me a little while to definitely try to be concise. But I mean, industrial forestry is essentially managing the trees on the landscape for the resource that they are, the product that they can produce. You're looking to grow trees for the purpose of harvesting them to produce paper, wood, what have you, some form of commodity. In urban forestry, you're actually, in some ways, you're looking to do the same thing. Yes, you're looking to grow trees, but you're looking to, the value of the trees is their sort of intrinsic value on the landscape, not the products that they can produce. It's not a resource to be extracted. It's a resource to be nurtured. In industrial forestry, you cut the tree down, you plant the tree, you cut the tree down, you get a product. In urban forestry, you are leaving the tree on the landscape, and you are getting the benefits of all the cultural, social, environmental, economic, and I guess the new ones, the health benefits that we're starting to realize those benefits of trees. So those are the benefits we're looking for in the urban forest. So I always joke with my partner, who's an industrial forester, planting forester, who's out there looking to identify the best spots to cut the trees down to make the mills money. Right. My job is actually the opposite. I'm out there trying to protect the trees. So I think the role of an urban forester more often is we're looking to increase urban canopy. We're looking to grow trees because we recognize the benefit. We're looking to build those business cases to justify and educate the public on why it's a benefit and what this benefit is to them. At the end of the day, monetary benefit, like how is this going to impact you and your taxes and reduction thereof. But also, we're out there to protect the trees, prevent people from cutting them down. Now, I mean, that's not in every circumstance, certainly, but we're out there to ensure that throughout development and construction, if at all possible, to protect the trees throughout that development and construction. And if not possible, to either, say, recover value for those trees that they had to be removed to replant them in the future, or simply to ensure that when trees are planted back on the landscape on the site, say if a development needs to remove trees but is looking to replant them, the site is then upgraded such that the trees that are being replanted on the site are going to achieve maturity. So in some cases, you could look at a site where, say, for instance, downtown Edmonton, the conditions are certainly deteriorating just due to rapid development, increased traffic, increased pollution, just by the nature of the city getting larger and development. The site has actually declined. If you were to remove say, a mature tree and try to replant a young tree, the young tree would not do that well. It would have a hard time establishing. We now have technologies in place where if you can go in through the development of a associated building, redo the sort of streetscape in front, put in some soil improvement technologies, you can get the conditions that will allow a mature tree in the future to survive. So you could be essentially removing a declining tree that's a maintenance issue for the city, which is a cost to the city and a cost to the taxpayers, and replace it with a younger tree that, while yes, you may have lost that mature tree on the landscape, you've put the potential back to achieve a tree that's better than the one that was actually being removed. So a tree that can potentially be longer lived, healthier, lower maintenance, lower risk of insect and pest disease, what have you. So it's always that balance of trying to, as an urban forester, balance when a tree should be removed. When are you at that cost benefit where you're sort of at that depreciating return on investment? When should you sort of pull the plug? And sometimes that's not always economic because people have an emotional attachment to trees. So sometimes that can be certainly political in nature. In some neighborhoods, people, it doesn't matter. The trees are, that's what they're going to hang their hat on. They want the trees. And in that case, we work to protect the trees. Certainly.
There's something to be said there, right? Like, I mean, I drive around a lot of the new developments and I'm like, I don't want to live here. And it's only in the last couple of years that I realized why. And it's because there isn't any mature trees, right? It feels empty and hollow and weird, right? And then you go to those old, we've got these like elms coming over the road the way we do, right? It's almost like a archway or something, right? And it's just, there's something about that just makes you happy, right? Yeah. But yeah, I guess like at the core of all that question, really it comes down to like why should people give a shit about trees in the forest or in the city, right? Like, I mean, I think a lot of people take them for granted, right? Like you walk down some of these new developments and there's this empty feeling of like, why do I not feel like this is quite comfortable, right?
No, absolutely.
And people are just starting to realize that it's that tree that's missing, right? So I think, yeah, it'd be good. I think we should talk about, why should people care about trees and like what are those services that they're providing, right?
Well, I mean, that's it. Short of going through the long list of services that they provide, as I mentioned, you have the cultural, social benefits of trees.
Yeah.
There's the economic benefits of trees, the environmental benefits of trees, and you've got now the health benefits of trees. So I know historically there always used to be that triangle of, I think there was social, cultural, environmental, and environmental, ecological, and economic. But now that sort of
health.
The fourth hub is that health.
Yeah.
But if you're taking a look at environmental, stormwater management, for instance, trees growing in the urban forest, the rooted area of the tree and the canopy itself has the ability to intercept rainwater and stormwater and slow its release back into the environment,
right.
And or uptake it and put it back into the environment through the natural transpiration of the tree.
Right.
So what that does, that reduces those peak flows on the existing stormwater management system.
Gotcha.
Reducing those peak flows increases the life cycle of stormwater management system. Increasing the life cycle reduces cost to taxpayers in terms of replacement costs of the asset. There are models that can actually monetize that increased benefit.
Trees erosion as well, I would imagine, right? Like
absolutely.
You're slowing down the rain as it's hitting the canopy. You reduce that erosion, reducing that desert effect, right?
Yep.
So,
absolutely. Or in the case of here in Edmonton with our large river valley, can stabilize the banks of the river valley and prevent erosion in that case.
Yeah.
Which has an infrastructure protecting benefit, I guess.
Yep.
But I mean, speaking on that, certainly there's that piece. There's research done, particularly in the United States, and this is more important in environments that are really hot. But that heat island reduction effect of a tree. So you've got a tree in an adjacent area downtown, adjacent to a building. It can actually reduce the cooling cost of the building, but can also actually protect the asphalt from the heating and cooling effects of the sun, which extends the life of that asphalt.
It's drastic too, right?
It
like
is.
It's really. There was a diagram I saw online recently, and it showed something about. I don't know if it was a real diagram or if it was just a mock-up, right? Model or something like that. But it was something like 32 degrees like downtown where there's no trees, you know what I mean? And then the exact same, like, 500 meters away in the residential where there's mature trees, it's like 22 degrees.
Yeah.
And it's like, and that's like reduces the cost of like cooling your home, reduces like all kind, like, you know what I mean? Cost of watering your lawn because there's not as much evaporation. I mean, it just keeps building, right?
Oh, absolutely.
That's just the temperature side of it.
And but I mean that temperature side, so that impact on, say, your asphalt, that actually reduces the lifespan of your asphalt. So there has been some studies in the United States that say that you can actually increase the lifespan of a hard surface, asphalt surface, by up to 40%. I don't know exactly what that means, but at the end of the day, it is again a cost savings that would be passed on to the taxpayers.
Yep.
You now have that road doesn't have to be replaced as often, meaning that's less taxes that you have to pull from taxpayers. So trees have that benefit.
Yeah. Do you know how much it is? Like say like a mature elm, like American elm, like we have here. How much would like say you had a street that's all American elms along the street, and then the next one over doesn't have that? Do you happen to know like the actual difference that would be temperature wise? Like say it's 30 degrees outside. What would it be? Do you know?
I don't have no, not off the top of my head. I think there are some studies. Well, there definitely have been some studies done, and you can see some of those little infographics which will show where they've actually tested the temperatures. I mean, we've never done that specifically here. However, that's not to say that those values aren't captured. There's several ways that you can actually value trees. One way is actually a benefit benefit analysis,
right.
which takes a look at valuing the trees based on the benefit they provide. And they do take into consideration that heat island reduction, as well as stormwater management, carbon sequestration, pollution mitigation, economic value such as increased property value, aesthetics. And they're now just starting to take into consideration some of those health benefits of trees. So those are actually, like, that's sort of the most recent finding, or I guess the new sort of avenue that researchers are looking at, because they're starting to see, we don't exactly know why, and the research is clear on that. People don't know why trees seem to be improving the health benefit. There was a study done out of the University of Chicago by Berman was his last name. I apologize, I don't remember his first name.
That's right.
Psychologist, and he took information out of Toronto. And I guess there was, let's see if I can remember. It was taking a look at the psychological and health benefits of living on a tree-lined street. And I think the study found that if your street has at least 10 trees lining it, it's the increased health benefit of having an income of $10,000 in excess of what you currently have, or I can't remember the other statistic. It was a fun little anecdote. But essentially, the study did show through information collected from Health Canada and the Provincial Health Organization that tree-lined streets, or people that live in areas with tree-lined streets, have increased health.
Psychological and physical.
Psychological and physical. So there have been a couple studies, I can't quote any off the top of my head, that took a look at people recovering in hospitals that had green spaces or access to green space, and the increased recovery times of individuals who had access to green space.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I'm certainly not one to always espouse the Eastern arts, but the idea of forest bathing that's come out of Japan.
Forest bathing.
I know.
Right, what the hell's that?
I mentioned it to my brother, and my brother said, "What is it?" He imagined me running around naked in a forest with a bar of soap, with the authorities chasing after me, and me saying, "It's a new thing from Japan. It's cool."
He definitely shouldn't be imagining you naked.
Yes.
Just a thought.
Maybe it's got one of those sensor bars on it. But no, forest bathing is this concept that spending time in the forest increases mindfulness, increases your ability to focus, improves your overall mental well-being.
It's kind of like that grounding thing that people are talking about. They're saying you should sit, or again, it's all the Eastern mysticism type thing, like stand barefoot on the ground and feel the earth, and that you're in tune with it, and this and that. And who knows what there's something there, but it's definitely nothing wrong with it. There is something pretty awesome about, like, your toes through the grass and something. You know what I mean? Like, it does
absolutely.
feel relaxing.
But that idea of forest bathing, I mean, every chance I can, I get out into the forest, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It makes you feel better.
Absolutely.
At the end of the week, if you go out there, like, I'm no happier than when I'm on the side of a mountain climbing or hiking up through, greenery and smelling the forest and allowing your sort of mind to settle and not have the constant stimuli. So there's certainly, there's truth to that.
Getting away from cell phone service definitely helps.
But that concept of forest bathing, I think it really does certainly ring true. There's definitely truth in that.
Yeah.
So in an urban environment, while you might not be getting maybe the same benefits you would if you were right out there in the bush, I guarantee you everyone knows driving or walking down a tree-lined street is certainly much more relaxing than walking down a downtown street that has no greenery with the hustle and bustle.
Yeah.
Or even you take a look at here in Edmonton, we've got White Avenue that has the nice large elms.
Yep.
Take a look at the amount of people that you'll see shoulder to shoulder on White Avenue on any given day. It's one of the busiest spots in town. Is it because of the trees? I mean, I think there's obviously
it'd be
something
weird
to be
without
said.
them, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I would argue that it's, that's probably one of the main reasons why that is one of the, most high profile or highly visited places in town, because you can actually walk down the street and not get burnt by the sun in the summertime.
Yeah.
We have our tree lighting program that has the whole place lit up in the wintertime and makes it a little bit more attractive. But those trees definitely change the environment. There's more patios, there's more hustle and bustle and people.
There's a few other streets that are like that, but you're right. They're missing the trees, right? Like 124th Street, and then like even Jasper Ave downtown. It's like, but they're not. Yeah, they don't have that cover, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That and just something that feels warm about having a tree, right? I don't know what it is.
No, absolutely. And I think too, the trees also, like there's proof that trees actually slow traffic, which that's that traffic slowing effect increases or reduces chances of accidents, reduces carbon footprint because the cars are burning less carbon. You're probably, it's one of those, just might be very small, but it's all cumulative. It adds up, one of those extra benefits. Less cost to you in terms of fuel, less accidents, which are a drain on the social service network and the policing. You've got that calming effect also, for businesses, slows cars down. They're looking at your business. They're going, oh, I'm going to shop there. I think having that effect. We do know those trees along tree-lined streets just slow cars, partially just because it gives you that tunnel effect. So you have got that, you feel like you're closed in, so you're more likely to drive slower. Right. But I think part of it is just people are, enjoying themselves a little bit more. It calms you down. It slows you down. You're looking at something, green and pretty. You're more likely to slow down and have a look at it.
Something angry about the highway, not quite so angry about something that's covered in trees. Yeah. No, I imagine there's probably something there. Yeah. If not psychologically, then something else going on with the lighting or whatever, right? Yeah, no, that's cool.
But that's it. Then you've got your economic benefits. So certainly anything from, like, as I mentioned, White Avenue, you've got, increased foot traffic to your business because the environment is just more livable. Right. You've got the aesthetics that are going to increase your property values. I remember looking at properties when I was buying my first house, and I was I automatically gravitated towards homes that had large trees or properties that had large trees, partially because I'm a tree nerd, but also because no one can deny they're beautiful. They really add a certain value to the property.
Absolutely.
And of course, knowing that they can reduce your heating costs in the summertime and your cooling costs in the winter is an added benefit.
Big time.
So you've got that economic benefit. And there's a number of other economic benefits. Certainly, a city with more trees is going to have greater tourism. You're going to be drawing more people to the area. Parks with trees versus parks without tend to attract more people, particularly to the treed areas. Yeah. Then, I think I sort of discussed the health benefits, and then there's those cultural, social benefits. And those are ones that are actually a little bit harder to put sort of a monetary value on.
Yeah.
And I would argue, there's methods for valuing trees. We've got things such as I mentioned, that benefit analysis that takes into consideration some of the benefits the trees provide, puts a dollar value to those. And that's how you determine a value for the tree. There's also a cost analysis whereby you essentially take a look at the cost of replacing a small tree and you magnify that up to the size of the large tree. So if you're removing a large tree, you actually determine how many small trees it would take to make up that big tree. Yeah. And then you take the cost of replacing that small tree and you multiply it by that number and you get a value.
So what's a tree worth? What's a mature elm worth?
Oh, a mature elm, like in the city of Edmonton, some of our mature elms can get upwards of $70,000.
$70,000.
And what I would argue is that is that even enough sometimes? And that's because can you adequately value the cultural, social benefits? And
I would argue no, you cannot. Probably.
No, I think it is challenging. I mean, they certainly try, but for instance, we have neighborhoods in the city where there's a lot of rental properties, not a lot of ownership. Right. As a result, if a mature tree is to be removed, oftentimes there's not a lot of outcry. There's not a lot of resistance from neighbors to the removal of that tree, so long as the tree is replaced and the value is collected by the city of that, for whoever is removing that tree. In other neighborhoods where there is more ownership, and you've got, wealthier residents or in wealthier neighborhoods, particularly some of those older neighborhoods, you're going to see they will fight tooth and nail for those trees. Yeah. And they're out there being the advocate for the urban forest. They want to see those mature trees remain on the landscape. And in many cases, they will not accept. We can say that tree has a value of $70,000. We're looking to recover that, and we will use that to replace canopy here and elsewhere in the city, and also ensure that the tree that replaces the one that's being removed is going to grow to maturity, and we're going to have the right soil conditions, which do cost money.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. That's not enough value to them. So are we adequately valuing that tree? No, because I would argue the residents, potentially the tree's priceless to them.
Well, and even you look at from a carbon perspective, right? I spoke with Marty Lukert from the university. He's an economics professor there, and he's been doing lots of research into biofuels and stuff like that. And as a result, he's had quite a bit of a deep understanding of the carbon market and kind of the carbon tax and where that kind of should be. Mm-hmm. And like according to him, anyways, there is not a conservative estimate on the planet about carbon tax that says it is anywhere near what it should be, what it's actually valued at. He's like, it's orders of magnitude more than what we're currently paying for carbon, right? So even that alone, that's the carbon sequestration value of the trees. If you take into account a heavier carbon tax, it only goes up, right?
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of stuff, right?
So that's it right now. That benefits calculation I mentioned uses the sort of an international carbon rate per ton, and that's it. If he would argue that maybe that rate is extremely deflated,
really low,
and I mean, if he's correct, then those trees actually have a far significant value. And I think one thing that also should be considered is some of those functional. Trying to think what's the word I'm looking for here. To give you just to sort of try to speak it out in layman's terms, a tree out in the forest can sequester the same amount of carbon as a tree in an urban environment. But where's the need greatest? Maybe it's greater in the urban environment because there's more carbon being actually put into the atmosphere, and there's more people benefiting from it. So then, is it equal? Is the carbon sequestration of a tree in an urban environment equal to one in a rural environment? Potentially it's greater in the urban environment, and there should be almost an exponent there to value that sort of, I don't know, benefit by proxy of the being within the city.
Absolutely. No, I can appreciate that argument. I would think, it makes sense, right? Because it is that much closer to where the pollution source is coming from. So no, it totally makes sense.
But I guess one of the challenges is the value of a tree. I think it's only so much as the general public is willing to accept the value to be.
That's the value of anything, arguably, right?
Exactly, absolutely. It's value. It's by definition of what it is. But you take a look, like you have certain sort of political environments in Canada. If you go to the West Coast, and because of all of their history with the War in the Woods and their I would say green focus, they tend to be more protective of any green infrastructure, and they will place a higher value on it. So in Vancouver, they have very strict tree protection bylaws as a consequence, and they do value trees. They're much less willing to accept the destruction of the forest than, I don't want to say Edmonton is looking, there's an acceptance to that, but certainly because I think we are the West and more of a resource-based economy, we tend to view the trees more as a resource that can be consumed. So there's less of an appetite for protection of trees. Don't get me wrong, there's lots of appetite, but I think there is greater value placed on the urban forest in a place like Vancouver than there is necessarily in Edmonton.
Social values there are different too, right? Like generally speaking, you have a more socially conscious population in places like Vancouver and Victoria than you do in Edmonton, right? There's more economics and resource based here versus, you know what I mean? So it makes sense that they would be valued more there.
But I think that's my job as a manager to educate the public, to try to build those business cases to convince them of the benefit.
The never-ending challenge, educating the public.
Well, that's it. And I think it's interesting in urban forestry. We are a bit of an anomaly when it comes to asset management within a municipal context. We have to defend the value of the asset. So, for instance, if I take a look at my fellow coworkers, the engineers, they don't have to defend the value of a lamppost in its ability to shed light and provide safety to the public. But as an urban forester, I do have to defend the value of the tree in order to justify its existence on the landscape. And it's an interesting, we're very fortunate to have governments and a council that's supportive of that, of that fact to justify, because they see the benefit of it. And I think in general, the public does. They almost are willing to accept and to fund a program that will educate them. Because everyone knows, everyone looks at a tree and likes a tree. They almost want to be told, okay, go out and tell me all the reasons why this is good for me, and then I'll make sure that it has enough money to sustain it on the landscape. So I guess we are fortunate in that respect. And don't get me wrong. You could say Vancouver is definitely green-minded. They tend to be a little more socially conscious. That's not to say Edmontonians aren't.
No, of course not.
We're just...
as an average.
I'd say as an average, but we're definitely getting there. It's
Absolutely.
a surprisingly progressive metropolitan city. I mean, I was surprised when I came here 4 years ago, coming from both Vancouver and Ontario, to see just how metropolitan Edmonton was and how diverse it was and unique as a result. Yeah. And I was actually really surprised that Edmonton has been well done by its previous forest managers. If you take a look, you mentioned earlier those beautiful tree-lined streets with the American elms.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a testament to the previous forest managers here. One, with the forethought to actually plant trees. Two, with the wherewithal to actually build the business cases and develop the management plans and the maintenance plans.
It's a lot of money to do all that.
It is, and to convince the public that it's good to do.
Yeah.
And then two, to be doing some of those management duties such as protecting the urban forest. So, for instance, Edmonton has the largest population of Dutch elm disease-free American elms in the world. That's why we can have such a beautiful tree-lined, elm tree-lined streeted city. Anyway, back up here. A city with so many beautiful, mature elm-lined streets it's because the city managers in the past have worked so hard to develop the protocols, the bylaws, and the education material to prevent the introduction of Dutch elm disease to the city of Edmonton, and basically stop it at our borders. And
so we're kind of surrounded by it, right? Like it's
we are absolutely. Yeah. And why it hasn't come here to Edmonton, I think, is still in question. I mean, there's some belief it's because we don't have a contiguous population. We don't have any vectors. We are a bit of an isolated population this far north.
Yeah. There's
a belief that possibly the beetle that spreads the disease is potentially, can't survive in these cold climates. But I'm, or there are other reasons, right? Are there other? We don't know all the science. There could be, predator pest complexes which are keeping it at bay. Yeah. We don't know. Or it could be because of the administration and all of those sort of policies and regulations that have been put in place to prevent it from actually getting here that have been successful. I mean, maybe that's the reason. Maybe it was the actual active management of the urban forest that has protected it thus far. Yeah. And with emerald ash borer on our doorstep now in Winnipeg, I am certainly frightened. I was in Ottawa when emerald ash borer rolled through Ottawa. I saw what it did. Yeah. The city of Edmonton has about 30% of its 30% of its street tree inventory is green ash.
Oh, okay.
So that's hundreds of millions of dollars of removal and replacement costs. And that's just the cost to the city. Yeah. We estimate there's roughly the same number of ash on private property. So to the residents of this city, that's additional hundreds of millions of dollars of removal and replacement costs.
Yeah.
And then all that opportunity cost of lost urban canopy. So, working very hard to try to develop the exact same framework to protect our city from emerald ash borer.
Yeah, no kidding.
And also...
So where is that right now? How close is that
It's in Winnipeg.
It's in Winnipeg. That's the closest it's been. Okay.
And that's a lot closer than I think some people think. And that's certainly the challenge to try to impress upon people is just how close that is.
Well, there's no Rockies in the way to stop them from getting over, right?
No.
Like for example, that's what happened with the pine beetle, right? The Rockies for a long time kept most of the population from getting over.
Yeah.
But we don't have that.
But you take a look, Dutch elm disease certainly moved a lot faster. Now, Dutch elm disease hasn't made it to Edmonton, but I don't want to be the person who's crying wolf here,
right?
But I think emerald ash borer is a far more virulent pest than Dutch elm disease. I would be much more worried about it. I'm much more concerned about it that it actually will make it here. So we're developing the management strategies, management plans. We're looking to branch out, diversify the canopy, reduce the amount of total ash as a percentage of the canopy to reduce our exposure to the pest.
Right. So do you think that's going to come over through firewood type situation, or you think just environmentally it'll slowly creep its way here?
So I don't think it won't creep its way here naturally because they're just like American elm and Dutch elm disease. There is no vector, so there is no. Green ash, native green ash. Winnipeg's as far as it really goes. I mean, it does go a little bit farther into Manitoba. I'm not sure if it's native in Saskatchewan. I apologize, but I mean, it's possible that it's native in parts of Saskatchewan as well. But it's not native around here, so there are no contiguous stands.
So they can't get into mountain ash then.
No, it doesn't get into mountain ash. It's only in ash. So it's going to get here either by firewood, campers coming through, heading to the mountains, bringing firewood, potential.
Yeah.
It could hitch a ride on trucks, on transports. It could hitch a ride on trains, on lumber, or it could come here on nursery stock being purchased from areas that may be now you're not allowed to move infected or ash outside of a quarantine zone, but the zone may not be quarantined in time and the material moves because you don't detect it till after the fact and suddenly you've moved the pest. Yeah. I know in Ottawa there's some belief that it may have actually moved from to Ottawa from southern Ontario via nursery stock because it actually... when I was there, I remember going on a conference and they were projecting 7 years. Within 7 years, emerald ash borer would arrive in Ottawa, and it was detected within a month of me going to that seminar. Yeah. And it did seem to be, it was a development that was all young ash trees. So
it's really impossible to make those numbers work, right? You're just like, I think it'll be this, and but who knows, right? All it takes is one bad event, and it's game over.
And that's it. Seeing how quick it moved from southern Ontario to Ottawa and how fast it moved, and they were projecting based on how quick it had moved from Windsor to Toronto that it was 7 years to Ottawa, and it was already in Ottawa. Right. Makes me definitely concerned that it's Winnipeg is a lot closer than we think. Oh, yeah. But it can be very difficult to convince people of that concern, so that we can put the money up front to try to really buffer ourselves from not if but when it comes. Right.
Yeah. Again, the impossible task. Right.
Yeah.
The problem. The solution to every problem: educating the public.
Educating the public.
So yeah, we haven't really touched on like the pollution side of it and the air quality side of it, right? So I don't know if you could speak to the numbers there at all.
I wish I had the numbers off the top of my head. Unfortunately, I don't per se. Yeah. What I can say is the way we valued the urban forest in Edmonton is we valued it using a U4 analysis, which is a benefit-based valuation of the urban forest developed by it's a model that uses peer-reviewed research developed through the United States Department of Agriculture, using growth models and data from various locations around North America. It's about as good as we've got, and it is a very good system. Right. But it actually takes into consideration the carbon sequestration, the pollution mitigation, the stormwater management of the urban forest, and puts a value on the urban forest. So Edmonton's urban forest, when we ran the last U4 back in 2009, was valued at about $1.2 billion. Okay. Based on those numbers, we project currently it's probably around $1.4 billion today.
Is that including the river valley?
That includes the river valley. So that's all the natural areas as well as the urban forests, the sort of the street trees and park trees. Yeah. So that's the entire urban forest in Edmonton. Based on its benefits it provides, its annual benefits it provides. It's a value of about $1.4 billion. Gotcha. And that's again using peer-reviewed research. That's something. That's awesome. That's the same huge model that most municipalities in North America will use to value their urban forests. So it is sizable. Yeah. Which is also remarkable given that we are in sort of that parkland boreal interface where there would be naturally a fair amount of grassland here historically. So we do have a sizable urban canopy given the sort of the historic climatic region we live in. Yep. And also recognizing that, the River Valley, while it's all native trees, the street tree and park tree inventory is almost entirely non-native species. Yeah. But I don't have those specific numbers in front of me. However, the city of Edmonton does have a website. It's called YegTree Maps. Okay. And if you go on YegTree Maps currently, it's a open source data portal. And you can actually see the entire street tree and park tree inventory of the city. And if you click on a tree, it's sort of one of those geo interface portals. Right. You can actually sort of zero in with satellite imagery and see your house and take a look at the tree in front of your house. You can click on it. Yeah. It'll actually give you the tree. So it's our inventory data. It'll tell you the species. It'll tell you its size. And it'll actually give you a breakdown of the annual benefits and the value of those benefits for the tree that's in front of your property. So it uses the model from that, from the U4 suite. Yeah. I guess it's not called U4 anymore. I believe it's called iTree now. Okay. The iTree system, the iTree software suite. There's different components, iTree Streets and iTree Eco, and they sort of different ways system, of valuing your urban forest. But uses that model and sort of pushes out a value for, it'll tell you how many grams of carbon or tons of carbon. I don't think it would be tons. How many grams of carbon your tree actually sequesters per year. It'll tell you how much pollution it reduces. It'll tell you the value of its stormwater management capacity. So you can actually see the tree out in front of your street and see the value. So that's just for the urban forest inventory and the street and park tree inventory.
That's cool.
But
I'll tell you how much oxygen it's producing probably too as a component of the pollution mitigation.
I can't remember if it actually has oxygen production, but I think I think certainly it actually tells you, I think, more of the value, the dollar value of that tree. So, for instance, you could take a look out in front of your house. You might have a small ash tree, not that large, and it'll tell you it's producing, $140 in value every year. So that's $140 value to you, but it's increasing year after year as the tree gets larger. A mature tree might be producing $1,000 in value every year. But you also have to recognize that, now amortize that compound it over a 100-year lifespan, and per tree that's a sizable benefit.
No, it's huge, and I think that's what people kind of tend to forget, right? They see it's a nice tree, who cares, right? And I think that's the hard part, is trying to convince people that it's important that these things are here, and the more the better, right? Like I know now people are starting to do, there's more of that, what do you call it? Not urban farming, but like people, like by White Ave, they're starting to have these empty lots. There's people are starting to farm, right? And that kind of stuff, right? And I know a few people who are trying to build like rooftop farms and forests and stuff like that. And I'm excited to see what the future of the city looks like, right? Like, because right now you have all of these unused areas on the top of buildings where it's easy to put a farm down there. Like, you can grow carrots and lettuce and whatever, have apple trees and all kinds of weird stuff, right? And again, more economic value to the population, right? As well, for not just economic value, but environmental value and health.
Oh, absolutely.
You could arguably double this amount of green space that you have.
You could. I think the challenge is it's initial investment, right? It's always hard to try to convince people of that initial investment. You have to build that business case and make the projections. Well, here's the value over the life cycle of that investment. And I think that the challenge too with green infrastructure is, unlike other city assets, it's one of the only pieces of infrastructure that actually appreciates in value and actually appreciates the value that it provides. So if you invest a little bit of extra energy into that resource, into that asset, you're going to get a greater benefit out of it. So for instance, a lamppost, it's a lamppost. Over its life cycle, it just degrades. You might be able to go out there and paint it every once in a while to replace the light bulb, which will increase for a time being. But at one point, its life cycle is done. It needs to be replaced. So you invest up front and it declines. A tree, you invest up front and it appreciates. I mean, at one point it obviously drops off because it dies. But for over its lifetime, it actually keeps providing increased benefit up. Whereas the lamppost keeps just going down.
Costing resources.
It's a unique asset in that respect.
Absolutely.
But trying to convince someone that in order to get a tree on site that's going to survive for 50 years requires you to invest, say, $10,000, that can be a hard pill to swallow. So in the downtown core, if you want to have adequate soil volume, uncompacted soil that's going to allow that tree to grow and thrive, there's a cost to that. You can't just plug a tree in the ground and expect its roots to find its way under hard compact asphalt in a building foundation. You need to provide that soil volume, which you have to use the soil improvement technologies like soil vaults, soil cells, what have you, that give that uncompacted soil volume. There's a cost to that up front.
Of course,
But of course, now my job as an urban forester is to show over the life cycle of that tree, is there a benefit to you versus the cost? Should we just have a small pit, put a small tree in it, and then when the tree dies after 5 years, constantly replace it? And you're never going to get a mature tree on that site. You'll never get the benefits of a mature tree on that site, but the cost will be, $1,000 every 5 years to replace the tree. Are you happy with that? You're getting no benefit benefit out of that tree, or very little anyway? Or would you prefer we spend $10,000 up front, that tree will live 100 years, we'll never have to replace it, and it'll just increase the benefits it provides over that 100 years.
That long-term perspective is hard for people to see, right?
It is, but I think people are starting to buy into it. I've certainly seen some definitely progress, and there is a lot of support for this now. But there's still a lot of naysayers. Okay,
always
do the technologies? Well, that's it. Some of the technologies are new. Do they work?
Yeah.
Can you prove it? Do they work in our climate? Do they actually give you a benefit? Is there really a benefit to having the mature tree versus the cost of installing that expensive tree up front? And I think oftentimes when you tell a person it costs $10,000 to plant that tree, they choke.
Yeah.
But if you told them it's $10,000 to put the lamppost next to it,
yeah,
they also might think, okay, well, that tree, you're willing to spend $1,000 to put a tree, but no more. But you have no issues spending, $10,000 to put a lamppost in the ground. Now, $10,000 obviously be extreme for a lamppost, but not that extreme.
One hell of a lamppost.
Well, you'd be surprised. I mean, infrastructure's not cheap these days, right?
Yeah.
Lampposts are not that cheap.
Yeah.
So I think, you have to recognize that everything is expensive these days. So $10,000 to ensure a tree that survives a 50 to 100-year life cycle may not be that expensive if, when that tree's at maturity, it has a value of $40,000 to $70,000.
I was going to say the return on investment is pretty massive, right?
Yeah.
If that was the stock market, everyone would be investing.
Yeah.
Right. It's just you got to think about it kind of that way, right?
Yeah.
But yeah. No, it's a huge challenge, and I can't imagine what you're going to try to do to convince people that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think the tide's kind of turning, and you're starting to see people think more long term about this stuff, right? And like with things like climate change and all kinds of other stuff, it's an ongoing assault on our way of life, and being like, okay, well, how do we steer this in the right direction so it's not a cataclysm, right?
Well, that's it. And I think urban forests really are a risk management strategy for municipalities.
Yeah,
reducing that peak flow on your sort of stormwater infrastructure, preventing that heat island effect, and reducing the heating costs of your municipality, which reduce carbon needs and fossil fuel needs.
Yeah.
I mean, all these things, like just by planting trees, you really are mitigating some of those impacts, both chronic and acute, on the urban forest.
Yeah.
Recognizing, of course, if a storm rolls through, there's certainly a cost of picking up all the tree branches that fall and trees that snap. But yeah, exactly. But I mean, that would be like any other part of the infrastructure. If you've got a major flood, you're also going to have to be replacing roads and what have you.
Yeah.
But I think that's something that is easily manageable. But I think it's a great risk management strategy for municipalities to be planting trees. And I think more and more studies are coming out. It's great to see. It's really sort of a budding field, this view into how the environment and green infrastructure improve the livability of cities and the sustainability of cities. And not just the sustainability of cities from a environmental perspective, but an infrastructure perspective.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, it totally makes sense. What do you think about, there was a TED Talk I listened to a while back, and this guy was talking about, instead of planting ornamental trees, right, we start planting stuff like fruit trees or stuff that produces food, right, that people could harvest and use up, right? I mean, there's a it falling off the tree and rotting waste argument. But his argument was more from a homeless perspective, from like the homeless population being able to have access to good produce, right, for free. And it's like there was something to be said there. Like, we have these trees growing that are producing all these kind of ecosystem services, right? It's great, but they could be providing one extra one, which is nutrition, right? So it's like, there's a lot going on there, and I wonder like what your general opinion is on, like, say, replacing elms with apple trees or whatever. Right?
Well, I mean, this is a challenge. I've certainly struggled with it too. We have a number of these sort of initiatives that oftentimes show up on my doorstep, similar to using wood waste and properly utilizing the wood waste, or making sure when you're removing trees you're able to recover the wood material in there and use it back into the construction of the building, and that's being developed in front of the tree. Exactly, reducing waste. So some of these sort of, I don't want to call them blue sky initiatives, but they certainly are. They're new, and I mean, I think they're those sort of disrupting new initiatives. The challenge is we almost need to identify a way to I guess it's educating the public or building the business case to identify, is there a real, true, and defined benefit of doing this?
Right.
One of the challenges with fruit trees, and don't get me wrong, City of Edmonton actually has quite a few fruit trees in its inventory.
Yep.
They are maintenance heavy. They don't tend to get as large, so you're certainly not going to get, it's nothing you'd want to be planting along a roadway necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly we've got crab apples and cherries along roadways, but they don't really produce any edible food per se. But say a fruit crop like plums or actual true apples, certainly
Something
they
that
can
can
grow in
survive
Edmonton.
here. Yeah.
And they can survive in parkland.
Yep.
We do work with some organizations which actually do go out and collect the fruit from these trees. But is there a market for it? Is there a way to develop that sort of, I guess it's not supply chain, but develop that market for it, and assist that, so that if you are actually going out there and planting the apple trees, you actually can effectively harvest the crops, and there is a benefit to actually planting them. Because currently we do know, even with the local organization, which I can't remember their name, but they go out and will collect sort of surplus fruit. We still have a lot of trees that produce fruit that simply goes to waste. So would we be realistically looking at planting more, or should we be trying to develop the means of actually getting that fruit to, say, a food bank? And then, of course, there's a cost to that. And is there a benefit to that cost? It's quite complex.
That's what I thought. It's very complex.
Logistically, it can be complex. And then, of course, there's that issue of liabilities. Okay, the city's now producing a food crop. What if a person gets sick eating that fruit? Now is the city liable for not ensuring that fruit was safe to eat? Would we necessarily be encouraging it? There's always challenges. And I hate to say no. It's like the idea of recycling wood. I have individuals who come to me and say, I think this would be a great idea. I'd like to get some of this wood and we could mill it up and maybe I could sell it. That's great. However, I can tell you a number of reasons why you're going to be challenged to do it. One, as a municipality, we can't just give the wood to one person, because why wouldn't we give it to everybody or anyone who asks? So there has to be some competitive process to actually sell it, which, we could develop. We could develop an auction. Sure. All right. Is there somebody who's interested in that wood? And even if we sold it for $1, is there somebody who'd be interested in it? Oftentimes the answer is no. For elm wood, because of a bylaw, the elm actually has to be debarked instantly, so it isn't a vector for the transmission of Dutch elm disease. The debarking of the elm log is a cost greater than the value of the elm log. So elm woods were out almost instantly. Okay, you've got ash. That's a half decent wood species. You cut that down. Now you have to sell it. We use a competitive process to sell it, but someone has to store it in the meantime. So there's, cost to storing material. It's certainly not free. And then you sell it for $1. So you're really only selling it for social credit. You're not really selling it for a value. There's a cost to taxpayers to do that then. And then in urban environments, wood tends to be, and an arborist certainly can attest to this, an arborist chainsaw will dull probably 10 times faster than a chainsaw of someone who works in the bush. And any logger who's ever worked in the bush will recognize that trees that grow along the roadways will certainly dull your chain faster, because the silica from the roadways that gets kicked up gets embedded in the tree. So the trees are essentially embedded with silica. And in an urban environment, that rings true for almost all trees, because they grow along the edge of roadways and we sand our roads in the wintertime. So that silica slowly gets embedded in them and they act almost like sandpaper. So our chains just dull. So if you then sell that ash log to someone who has a little wood miser mill, you're going to dull their blade, and then there's a higher probability of there being nails or what have you in urban wood, just because of their proximity to local residents. So now you hit one nail. If you didn't have a metal detector, now you've just blown $1,000 blade off your wood miser mill, and now you are just no longer cost competitive. You've just sunk your entire operation. So I hate to be the person that's always kind of like, logistically no, because of course if anybody who is looking at wood waste recycling goes to a city councilor, the councilor is going to go, that's a great idea, here you go, Crispin, you should look into this. Oh no, I have to be the person that says, realistically, this is a challenge. Now that's not to say it can't work. You just have to find the person who can make it work. And you also have to find, again, I'm limited in time and resources. So do I have the time to be able to apply for that social credit, recognizing it's simply a cost to me?
Yeah.
I know oftentimes, for firewood, maybe it's actually, there's a value, but then of course I don't want people moving firewood outside the city, so it's not something I'd necessarily condone. We do, within the city, all of our wood waste is either diverted to mulch for our shrub beds, or anything that's diseased goes up to the DAP biofuels facility. So we do, everything is essentially recycled or reused for some purpose. So it's not as though we aren't utilizing our wood waste here in the city, but some of those innovative models, I know. We have had a couple developments here in the city that have used the trees that were removed on site and had them actually milled up for decorative pieces within the development. And that's certainly an option, because there's an incentive for the development for social credit. They get to tell the neighboring community that tree was cut down, but it didn't go to waste. Yeah. So here it is as a decorative, table in our foyer of our office building, what have you. So there are a few developments in the city. There was one in Oliver that did that. So there are some unique ways where you can actually make it work. Right. And I think that's always the trick, finding a way to make it work. Yeah. So when it comes to like food forests and those sort of urban orchards, it's not to say that they can't work. And certainly if you get a community group that has some real sort of stewardship over the site and can manage it, there are opportunities. And I know through the city's, we have a community gardens program. We are looking at fruit trees in those community gardens programs.
And that makes perfect sense, because those people are very passionate, and they're there, every couple of days tending their crops and making sure that they've got the bee hotels there, and all kinds of stuff, right? So the
challenge we have there too, though, is pruning a fruit tree is very different than pruning a city tree essentially when we prune our trees, we're pruning them for safety, number one. Yeah. When you're pruning a fruit tree, you're actually pruning it for fruit production. Yeah. It's a different technique, and none of our arborists are trained in that technique, because it's not something we would invest in. We don't have enough fruit trees, and we don't have a benefit. Gotcha. Recognizing that we have to prune, 45 to 50,000 trees a year across the city, and our primary focus is public safety and also the health of the trees. Trying to, create a crew that can prune fruit trees for fruit production, that's a cost that I don't think we're willing to accept right now. So it's a matter of identifying individuals that have the wherewithal, the public, that can be those stewards that can prune the trees. But then, of course, there's the liability aspect. Can I be allowing a private resident to prune a city tree? What if they injure themselves in the process? Yeah. So it's always a delicate balance, trying to figure out a way to...
It's exhausting that there's always that, right? It's always a liability thing, right?
It is.
So
and I hate
what if some idiot drops a chainsaw on his foot and it's our fault? It's
true, yeah. But I hate to be the person that constantly says no, because deep down I believe their heart's in the right place. Yeah. And maybe they're the ones to do it, but I need them or someone to come to me with a model that's going to work.
I think you might see that in the future. Like the people that I've talked to, there's a lot of really passionate people around that urban gardening scene, right?
Oh,
and that's the kind of stuff that they love to get into. So I think if you reached out to the right communities, you could probably see that happen.
Yeah, I need someone to come to me with that value added, and also that business case that demonstrates, where that benefit is to me, because I have to, at the end of the day, every dollar that I have in my budget, I'm the steward of, and I have to respond to the residents of the city and inform them of how it's being spent and assure them that it is being spent wisely.
Justify it.
And justify it. Yeah. So if I'm not aware of that business case and I'm not educated, I need those people to educate me. And certainly, don't get me wrong, I go out and try to educate myself, but to this date, I haven't seen a model that's been that successful. I've seen some that have claimed to be successful, but then they end up being quite short-term projects. So if they were that successful, they'd still be running. There are apparently a few, and certainly it depends. Like when it comes to wood waste, if you take a look at Southern Ontario or Eastern United States, certainly you've got high value timber down there. Black cherry, black walnut. I mean, those are there's a real value to that.
Yeah.
Up here, our limited species diversity, bur oak, green ash, and American elm, not high value species. And also, for the most part, too, you have to recognize the majority of the wood that comes out of our that we're removing off of our streets are dead trees.
Yeah.
They're not live trees. We're not harvesting live trees, so they've got disease, they've got rot. It's not something I can make hardwood floor veneer out of or any of those high value added products.
Of course.
So it's always a challenge. But I then again don't want to always be the person that says, no, logistically can't happen. I would love to, identify initiative and really see it successful and be that first person to actually really make it work.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there'd be some people listening to this podcast who are saying, no, I know where, I've seen this work and I've seen this be successful. And I've been around a while. There's always a reason why it's not, there's a reason why it's successful. Sometimes they're subsidized. Sometimes they're propped up. Sometimes it just works out really well. And it's sort of, as I mentioned, in an area that values its resource differently, maybe it'll be successful there. Here in Edmonton, it might be a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, makes sense.
Maybe not. Maybe it's just I'm being a naysayer here and I should give it a go.
No, it sounds like you're pretty open to the idea, but it still has to be proven, right? And being, responsible for the city's trees, you're responsible to the public. Then, yeah, exactly. You can't be just like risking the money on something, right? That's not what your job is. So
no,
that makes perfect sense.
But I mean, I think obviously though, with as you are government, you are sort of expected to take some degree of calculated risk in the sort of pursuit of innovation.
Yep.
Because, there are cases where, and, I liken it to, say, a vaccine for a rare disease. There is no industry out there that is going to develop a vaccine for a rare disease and invest all of its energy and resources to develop a vaccine that's going to be used by 10 people in the world because there's no benefit to them.
Exactly.
But a government is responsible to all of its people, including the minorities. So that's where it's the government's responsibility to develop that vaccine. And I think that's that's where the government has a niche. So the same thing with urban forestry. You've got, say, private industry, which is looking at the end of the day, has to make a dollar and stay salient and has to focus its energy on things that are tried and true and work. And I mean, there obviously will be some innovation in private industry as well, because they're always looking to build a better mousetrap. But in those cases where we know the need and the industry isn't supplying that need because the need is small, or in the case of my perspective, I'm playing the long-term game.
Yeah.
I'm playing a stewardship of a resource for the taxpayers of this city over a 100-year time frame plus. Industry isn't. They're usually producing a product they're selling and getting off their shelves tomorrow. They're not looking at 100 years. So I'm looking at the long-term game. I've got a significant risk. So how do I manage that risk? Sometimes that management requires a little bit of risk and a little bit of investment into innovations and new products that the industry isn't willing to provide, so that I can buffer the city from a potential future major expense. Case in point, Emerald ash borer, if that shows up, that's hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
I can reduce that risk by increasing the diversity of species on the landscape. Being here in Edmonton with a climate akin to Siberia, we're limited in the diversity of species we can grow in our landscape. So I'm challenged, but it doesn't mean we can't grow those trees. It's that in some cases they haven't been tried, and the private industry isn't that interested. I mean, obviously they will try, and we have been working with some of the local nurseries to try and introduce some new species, but they're limited in what they're willing to actually accept, whereas the city of Edmonton, through its own tree nursery, at very low cost, can start a small breeding program and try to develop those large form shade trees species that are survival. They can survive in our cold climate. So at the city nursery, we have a small breeding program. We're playing a game of numbers. So we're getting a northern population seed source from, say, we've got red maple from Timmins, Ontario. We get that seed source from Timmins, Ontario. Granted, Timmins, Ontario has got a slightly different climate than Edmonton, but it does get cold there too. We get the seed. We grow the seed up here at the nursery after the first winter, say, of 10,000 seedlings, which we just throw into a seed bed. It's not a significant cost. We're down to 100 trees. After the second winter, we're down to 10, but those 10 are surviving well. Then we can clonally propagate those 10. We now have a red maple that can survive in Edmonton's climate. So we're playing that game of numbers, a real breeding program, as opposed to the local nursery industry, which usually focuses more on a species trial program that will bring in a proven species or a specific clonal cultivar from, say, southern Ontario and try it for its survival here in the prairie climate. The challenge with cultivar being, clonal and basically no genetic diversity, if a cultivar of one species fails here, it's all of it will fail. So there's no point in, for instance, honey locust, like a northern acclaim. Glidicea tricanthos northern acclaim. If you grow that species here, if one dies, well, you're pretty well guaranteed that all the rest of them are going to die. That doesn't mean honey locust can't survive in Edmonton. It means that clonal cultivar can't.
Right.
So oftentimes, nurseries will write off honey locust as not surviving in Edmonton. We have honey locust growing at the nursery that are doing just fine because we went and found a northern population. We grew up the seed source. We played the game of numbers, and we'll be able to clonally propagate them. And essentially through a breeding program, you have to start somewhere.
Totally.
And so there is a cost to that. Don't get me wrong. It's not high, but there is a cost to that. But the cost of not doing it, of not diversifying the canopy and potentially having a catastrophic infestation here is hundreds of millions. Yeah. So putting a few $1,000s up front to try and buffer a potential future cost of hundreds of millions, I think is well worth the investment. But that's something that I think that's where a municipality steps in. And I think that's the benefit to having a city nursery and a breeding program and maintaining that internal expertise to be able to do that. There is a serious benefit to the public in having that resource at our fingertips, which is something I think Edmontonians are lucky to have, because most other major municipalities in Canada do not have their own city nurseries. Gotcha. So they wouldn't have that capacity. They're reliant almost entirely on the private industry.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Well, we've worked up on an hour and 10 minutes here. We've been flying through this. I think we made a record for words per minute with bringing you in. So I think there's a lot of information there for people to take up. That's for sure. I'm just trying to sort through it in my own mind.
Well, I apologize, but
no, it's all good.
Certainly, I know folks have mentioned to me, you talk fast. And of course, oftentimes I'll get that comment, are you nervous? And of course, no, I'm not nervous. I just talk fast and I talk a lot.
I'm just thinking, I'm like, is this guy on Ritalin right now? What's going on? No, it's good because you're speaking.
I'm drinking water. I don't even have coffee.
Yeah. Well, you're speaking concisely, so it's all good, right? It's perfect.
I know it's I guess when you're excited and passionate about a subject, you want to communicate everything to people. You try to just cram it all in there.
Yeah.
And you try not to bore people, and hopefully you can keep people engaged. But
I think it'll be good. I think we managed to cover a wide range of stuff here that's been trying to explain to people why trees are important in the first place to have on the landscape. And you spoke at great lengths to that, which is perfect, which is exactly what I was hoping for, right? So I think we nailed it. I want to thank you for coming on. This is great. I couldn't ask for someone more knowledgeable or better suited to speak to this thing, so this is perfect.
I appreciate the invite. I was actually quite excited when you suggested it a few months back now.
Yeah.
I thought, that'd be fun.
Yeah, no, I love doing it, man. It's been great. I haven't run into a single person yet that I wouldn't have on again to talk about something, right? Yeah. So, if in the future here, if there's something pressing you would like to get out to the public or whatever, or there's something you think is interesting that you want that just kind of blew your mind, like let's do this again.
All right, I appreciate it. I'd come back anytime you want to have me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. It's good.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot for listening, guys. If you have any questions for Crispin or myself, reach out at yourforestpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to share this on social media and tell your friends about it, and rate and review on iTunes. All that stuff helps a lot. I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot, guys.